Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up. This is where I talk about the books that I read, the books that I'm currently reading, and what's on tap potentially for next week. This is going to be a little longer than the normal week of reading because I was in London last week, so I didn't get a chance to film my week of reading. And let's be honest, I didn't get a lot of reading done because I was busy book shopping and visiting and traveling and having a fantastic time in London. So we'll make this kind of quick, but there's a lot here. I actually got a ton of reading done in the 11-hour flights to and from. So let's get started, shall we? First up, I saw this on Shawnee's channel, Shawnee and Bert's channel, Past Story Time. I'll put a link to their channel below. And this is Michelle T's latest book. Michelle T is a fiction and nonfiction writer. She writes some biographical work and essays as well as fiction. And her latest work is called Against Memoir, Complaints, Confessions, and Criticisms. And it's like a series of essays, but they're autobiographical. When I heard Sean talking about it, it sparked an interest and made me want to read it. Specifically about an era in time that I lived in the same neighborhood that Michelle lived in, and kind of the hijinks and craziness that was happening in San Francisco at that time. And she speaks specifically about this girl gang called the Hags that were this militant, like radically militant lesbian group. And I remember the Hags, and they were terrifying. They were so scary. And specifically Stacy, who I remember seeing seemingly everywhere. So it was a really great way to spend the trip from San Francisco to London, reading and kind of going back and remembering days past and strange times, and how San Francisco was just a really different place in the early 90s. So I really enjoyed it. I think she's got interesting things to say. I'm not sure how other people would take her work, specifically this one, but I really enjoy her work. If you're interested in someone who's talking about queer identity, about queer history, and with a really personal lens to it, I think she's a great writer. Incredibly accessible, and she's got a kind of wit about her that I enjoy. And she's not afraid of taking chances, and so I enjoy her writing. So that's what I read going out, and I finished the entire book on the flight. And I'm very proud to say I didn't take any physical books with me. So I had this from the library and just loaded it up on my Kindle, and that's all I read. It was nerve-wracking, but different story on the way back. I had plenty of books to read on the way back. So let's get to, and specifically novellas, because I'm still doing, this is my little remaining pile for novella November, and then also my nonfiction November. So I have still stayed with that theme except for my in real life book club, which I did a video of earlier this week that I posted. So please check that out because those women are absolutely delightful and brilliant. And apparently I'm not the only one who thinks so. So I'm so happy for the people who did enjoy it. Thank you for letting me know. I'm quite pleased, and I just love showing them off because they're fantastic. So let's talk about the books that I read on this plane. I was like a machine. I'm here to tell you, I don't think I've ever had such a great reading experience on a flight. First up, At the Villa by Somerset Maugh. And I saw this on Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventure. She had this cover, and I thought, okay, I'm looking for that when I go to London. I also had just a sublime, illuminating, wonderful day with Mel. She so generously met me in London, and we did non-bookish things. We went to a museum that was wonderful. It was the illustration museum. And then we went to lunch, and then we went to the Welcome Center. It was just a sublime, perfect afternoon. And thank you, Mel, for joining me for that. It was a delight. But she had talked about this book. This is my first Maugh, and I loved the writing, was infuriated by the story. It had me on the edge of the seat. The story is about a woman who her name is Mary Patton, and she has had a disaster. She's a widow. She had a disastrous first marriage where she was going to marry this man no matter what. She married him, and he was just a horrible person. And so she's not going to do that again. She's not going to be married again. She is in Florence, and she's just trying to figure out what she's going to do. And there's all these people around her, and there's a man who wants to marry her. And she's just trying to think about how does she live and what is she going to make of her future. So she has one proposal, and then she has another, someone kind of sniffing around who is also dastardly, similar to her previous marriage. And then she takes her life, kind of decides that she's going to live for herself to disastrous ends. And so it was very frustrating to me that a woman who, it felt like a morality play, that's the phrase, where she's punished for living her life and doing something that she wanted to do. And that really bothered me, and yet it made sense in the narrative. It made sense based on the time. But I would love someone to rewrite this in a feminist lens. But I don't know if it would have all of the exciting conflict and all of that, which makes a great book. So what are you going to do? So that's Up at the Villa. Then I read Watermark. This is an essay on Venice by Joseph Brodsky. Let's make sure if you can see that's a nice dark cover. Again, I love these kind of penguin, modern classic. I'm so excited. So this, again, another purchase from London. Now I got this because I was reading off of Bert's List. I'll put a link to my video below explaining what Bert's List is, also from Pastori Time. And in Bert's List was a Valerie Luiselli book called Sidewalks. It was about travel and adventure. And in that, she talks about being in Venice and looking for Joseph Brodsky's grave. I didn't know who Joseph Brodsky was. Well, I do now, and I read his book. This is a fantastic, wonderful, very poetic and literary exploration of Venice and why Venice is so interesting and what makes it so romantic. And they talk about time and how time weaves in and out and the waters and it's just a really beautiful, excellent book. Thank you, Bert, for leading me to a book that led me to another book. So that was great. The next one was this gorgeous little sweet little, I was calling it novella. It's not a novella. It's like a short story. This is The Gifts of Reading by Robert McFarlane. So Robert McFarlane wrote Underland, which is something that I'm getting ready to start for Nonfiction November. I think everybody seems to be reading it for Nonfiction November. Very great writer, really has a way with phrase. This is an essay-ish about, it's an essay, and it's about a book that he was given and the friendships and what it made him think and how it shaped his life. And I just thought that it was just a lovely conversation about how literature changes you and how it enriches you and it enriches those around you and builds community. So this was just a delight. This is by Penguin, just a small little tiny little book. Highly recommend it. Next up, this was one of the things that I was most excited to get, and when I went into Daunt Books, it was with this in mind. I'm so frustrated. I literally spent the morning trying to look for the book here. I think it's in my car. But I will find it because this copy is so great and I want to reread it. And the book is At the Pond, Swimming at the Hampstead Ladies' Pond. And this is edited by Ava Wong Davies. I have been fascinated with the Ladies' Pond at Hampstead. I haven't been there. I will go. Maybe I'll go this summer. I just think it sounds like such a delightful place. And I've always loved to swim, being raised in Africa. We used to swim in the ocean all the time. And I've started to swim again, not as often as I should, but that's a different conversation. So this just delighted me. It really compelled me. It was just right in my wheelhouse. And there were so many wonderful essays by all these different writers about what the ponds have meant for them and how they've approached the ponds and how it's helped their lives. But it's through so many different prisms and so many different voices that you just really get a sense of the community that the ponds have created. It was an absolute delight. I love it, and I'm sure I will read it again. A plus, love it. Next up, so this, sometimes you just find the people who give you great recommendations. So I was looking on Instagram, and Bert from Past Story Time had put this gorgeous cover of a book by Alfred Hayes on his page and on his post, and I thought, I said, that's a gorgeous cover. He was like, great author. If you've never read any of his work, you should try these two books. Well, guess who found one of them? So this is In Love by Alfred Hayes. Excellent book. Really very sad. It's a story of a man recounting his failing love affair. And the failures are so much about him, and you don't even know that as he's talking about it, if he even realizes it. But it's about how he met this woman, and he was kind of blasé about the affair and took a lot of it for granted. But the moment that she had another suitor, and there's a little twist to how that romance came into being. He all of a sudden perked up and had an interest. Shocking, right? I know. This is a very men sometimes kind of book. But the writing was exquisite. Really, really fantastic writing. Lovely pace. Really good, moody kind of 1950s New York City, that kind of vibe, very kind of Mad Men vibe. All going through this. I enjoyed it very much, even though I was so frustrated with the character. Didn't like him at all, thought he was a jerk, and he got what he got. But really happy I read it. Excellent choice there, Bert. Then I listened to an entire audiobook because I still had so much time of this 11-hour flight. So recently I saw Demi Moore at an event, and she came and was talking about her brand new book, and the book is called Inside Out. And I have to admit that I kind of I thought of her as kind of fluff, and your typical celebrity, blah blah blah. But she was very introspective. She had very interesting things to say, and if you look back at her oeuvre of work, you recognize that she really was doing a lot of things before they became current. So she did a movie about a striptease about a stripper who's kind of trying to hustle and working and trying to take care of her daughter. So she's in this field before Hustlers, which now all of a sudden is getting all this praise. She was in G.I. Jane, very, very tough movie, playing a woman who's trying to be a Navy SEAL. Very, very tough. She's just dealt with a lot of interesting feminist choices. And it's only in looking back, instead of kind of remembering of what it felt like in the time. I'm not saying all these movies were great. I'm saying the choices were interesting. And it feels like she was trying to push an idea about what women could be and what women could do, which I highly respect. The book was much better than I anticipated. I expected fluff and kind of a gossipy kind of thing, and it was not. It was really deep about how she ended up in her 50s, having 2 marriages crumble, and in the throes of addiction, and at an incredibly low point in her life, and unsure how she arrived there and how to get herself out of it. So it was really interesting, and she goes very far back and really talks about an upbringing that is incredibly unusual, and you can see how damaging how her childhood was. But she brings so much compassion and forgiveness and maturity to the conversation. Really, really enlightening. So I would say, if you like celebrity memoir, give this one a try, because she has something to say. And I'm almost positive it was ghostwritten. I think I heard about that in the New York Times review podcast, which makes sense. But the ghostwriter was fantastic, really, really well chosen. The next book I finished was an audiobook, and you may have seen us talk a little bit about it in the previous video I mentioned with my book club. And it's Quichotte by Salman Rushdie. I am not going to talk about Quichotte here until after I have a chance to speak with Lydia and Nikki about it, because we have a lot to talk about. So just stay tuned for that. The next book I finished, audiobook as well, was something that I every once in a while I'll read or listen to a nonfiction book about business, about leadership, about those types of things. And this one was a really good one, and something that I'm trying to employ and think about in terms of how to manage better and how to be the type of manager that inspires and activates and unlocks something in people that brings out better and more. And it is called Multipliers: How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. And this is by Liz Wiseman. Really interesting book. They actually looked at some phenomenal leaders of different industries, and where did they learn to become multipliers? How and what do they do? What do they do to diminish instead of multiply? So you get the counter. And I thought it was very practical, and just a really great, really, really good leadership book that made you think of things differently, and it helped you get out of a micromanaging and into an expansive type of leadership style. Highly recommend it. Really good. Multipliers. Was that. And then lastly, the last thing I just finished up that was just, I hate to compare and say this should have been like this. However, I was hoping for this type of book when I read The Ocean Wong, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. I was expecting something like this, maybe a little more poetry in that, but this was the full package. And it is How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. I did the audio of it, and it was remarkable because he's the one who narrates it. Touching, poignant, very thoughtful conversation and an exploration of his history and his relationship with his mother and his grandmother as he's growing into himself as a gay man. And all of that, what it all means to have found his sexuality and coming into his sexuality. I thought it was absolutely remarkable, beautiful, beautifully written, thoughtful, raw, jarring, very exposing. I mean, he tells you a lot, but you get a lot out of that. It doesn't feel gratuitous. It feels thoughtful and well positioned. I was very interested in times that he told you things and other times he pulled back. So there was a really interesting interplay there. I his voice is fantastic. This is going to be a very big book, I expect. And I think it just won some awards, and well-deserved. So, right, a ton of books were completed during this period. I'm feeling very good. Nov and Nonfiction November is treating me very, very well, as you can see. So let's talk about what I'm currently reading. If you saw the book club book, still making progress, going through it. So we'll put some serious time this weekend toward that, not in the Nov or Nonfiction November world. But I have two things that I'm doing: a buddy read with Celia, and I'll put her link to her channel below. A Single Man by Christopher Isherwood. We're reading this together. And then also, because of Instagram, I saw that she was reading the same thing I'm reading, which is John Berger's Way of Seeing. I've been very interested in this book for a very long time. I'm so happy that I found a copy in London and just kind of taking my time with it and thinking about it. I'm feeling like it's a wee bit dated. We'll talk more as I finish it up. Just got the access to my audiobook from the library of The Beautiful Ones by Prince. Oh, so already completely mesmerized. Fantastic. I think I'm about 12% in. It's going to be a delight. A great, great book, especially if you like memoirs about celebrity and musicians. Perfect. And then when it comes to my mood reading roulette, I have one thing that I'm absolutely going to do, which I'm going to be starting a buddy read of Dear Friend, From My Life, I Write to You in Your Life. And this is by Yi-Young Lee. And very excited to start this. Amazing Victober. I feel like I am just blowing through November. I couldn't be more delighted with my reading. I would love to hear, what are you reading? And what of what I've read have you read? What thoughts do you have? Tell me all of it. Look forward to talking to you later. Bye.